This happened literally 30 minutes ago. I let a dude into the server last night after an interview. Seemed really cool. Turns out he's a weirdo because he posted literal videos of a word I cannot say in the chat this morning, probably thinking I, as the moderator, wasn't awake. I messaged him after banning him and just said, "What the hell, dude?" He told me he thought it would make a strong impression on the other players. I just can't anymore. You know, he wasn't wrong. He made a strong impression. Was it a long-lasting impression? Yeah, definitely not. But strong nonetheless. So, mission failed successfully? So after reading these stories for a while, I've decided to contribute with my own experience. I was DMing for a group of 4 players. 3 of them were brand new. I didn't know any of them except for the experienced one. He's my friend and regularly DMs for me. As 3/4 of the group didn't know almost anything about D&D, I've created a completely generic fantasy game. 2 days before session 1, we gathered and created characters together. Most of the time, I don't assist players with character creation, but I couldn't tell completely beginners, "Hey guys, just read the rules, okay?" Veteran created Dwarven Light Cleric. Characters of beginners were Half-Elf, Fiend Warlock, Half-Orc Barbarian, and Tiefling Rogue. Session 1 has started. Party was traveling from City A to City B. I forgot names. This happened a while ago. They were escorting 2 merchants. Their route was well known for occurrences of people getting lost without leaving a trace. After some weird and funny roleplay between players and NPCs, I tried to advance the story. Suddenly, mysterious fog appeared around them, and it gets thicker and thicker. They could hear hushed whispers coming off of it. Players started preparing to fight if they had to, but Warlock stopped the conversation. "DM, this is BS. It's windy. How can there be fog?" I didn't mention anything about windy weather, I just said it's a sunny day. I just responded with, "Oh, I didn't say anything about wind. Besides, this is a fantasy game. Things like this, they happen." Warlock just shrugs and says he readies Eldritch Blast. A few moments later, weird humanoid-ish figures form in the fog around the group and start approaching them, whispering about their lord and needing to sacrifice to him. Warlock interrupts again. "DM, this is BS. How could fog speak? And how could it hurt us? Guys, screw it. Let's continue. We have a job to finish." I was a little shocked. Is this guy really going to talk crap about everything magical I mentioned? You know this is a fantasy game, right? There's magic and stuff. You play a warlock, a magician. He looks at me like I'm an idiot, but stays silent. We roll for initiative, but the feeling is gone. He ruined this moment of surprise and ambush by unknown creatures. I won't go through the combat specifically. They killed the creatures. Rogue even managed to capture last pieces of the fog into his jar before it completely vanished. They continued. We skipped through the rest of the travel. They arrived to the city. They got paid, and Barbarian expressed that he'd like to learn more about this fog. They talk about setting up a trap, doing some research, and wonder who their mysterious lord is. We end the session as they found an inn to sleep in, and the Warlock managed to seduce one waitress. After the session, I felt pretty satisfied. Newcomers got the idea of role-playing. They didn't even express murder-hobo tendencies. Warlock got his pleasure time and was okay with Fade to Black. I even forgot about the minor incident with the fog. A week passes and we all gather for session 2. I'm just tidying the room as Warlock messages me that he's there. He was like 30 minutes early, but I let him in anyway. He helps me tidy the room, and we talk for a bit, just killing time. Rest of the group arrived. I started a recap of the last session, but a Warlock immediately stopped me. "Yeah, so last session was pretty garbage. You met some cringy merchants, killed Mist, and went to bed." He tried to imitate my voice, actually somewhat successfully. I was utterly shocked by the fact that his behavior had changed so much in 5 minutes. "Hey man, what's your point? Just tell me what pissed you off. I'll understand." So he told me he didn't like that the merchants were female, he didn't like that I didn't imitate female voices, he didn't like my hair, he didn't like the fog, he didn't like his character, he thought I was a piece of garbage, he didn't like the inn, he didn't like the waitress, he basically didn't like anything. He finished his rant with, "For me, you aren't a dungeon master, you are... uh-oh." And he left. I cancelled the session, obviously. This was the first time I met a player this toxic, and I really just wanted to listen to some music and cry. Eventually, he tried coming back, but I should have told him to never ever enter my house again. TLDR, new player questions fantasy elements of the game during next session, and mocks and insults DM for everything that happened last session. That's pretty lame. I mean, look, I understand that DMs are not and should not be immune to criticism. You should be able to criticize your DMs, but don't be a dick about it. Being honest isn't an excuse to be rude and horrible, which this warlock clearly was. If you condescend to your DM, your game isn't going to be as fun. No one wins here. You make your DM feel like garbage, and you play a less interesting and fun game. So yeah, what's the point? Just be reasonable. Be kind when delivering criticism. Do it in a diplomatic way. This warlock clearly didn't enjoy the game, but for some reason just decided, instead of taking the time before the game to talk to the DM in private about any problems, he instead decided to try to humiliate the DM in front of the rest of the group. Not fun at all. Doesn't help that his issues with the game, well, they're pretty lame. This isn't such a bad story, to be honest. I just wanted to share. Also, forgive me for any mistakes in grammar. English isn't my native language, and I'm on my phone. We recently started a homebrew campaign, and the players decided to make an all-caster party, which means we have a sorcerer, a cleric, and a wizard. The player in question is the wizard. He plays an Aarakocra wizard, and as you would assume, he's going to move in combat and use flight to rain down spells. We started at 3rd level, and we were having quite some fun. However, at one point last session, the player took flight to avoid being shot by arrows about 90 feet up. He stood there casting spells and cantrips, and when the enemy's turn came, I realized that one of them had a sleep spell. Now, my players don't like when I'm not doing the absolute best the creatures could do, so I casted sleep on the flying wizard. As a note, I make every roll out in the open, as my players ask me to do that. They are terrified of fudging. Regardless, the spell took effect and he plummeted to the ground. As per rules, fall damage is 1d6 per 10 feet, which means he took 96 fall damage. Once I rolled, we realized the amount of damage taken was double his max hit points, which means death without any saves. Now that was harsh, but I had every intention of making sure the party could eventually resurrect him. But at that moment, I heard him shout over the mic, "This is BS! Why are you targeting me?" What followed were a few minutes of him essentially screaming. I just lowered the volume of my headphones. He thought I was obviously out to get him because his build was too powerful, and then he left the Discord. I stopped the session there and just apologized for the other players and went about my life. I thought he was just frustrated. However, I received a barrage of messages the next day of him trying to guilt trip me. Honestly, I just told him he was no longer welcome at my table. If he can't deal with an aspect of the game, why does he want to play? This is my story. It's not as bad as some out there, but I thought you guys could get a laugh out of it. Cheers. Someone who gets that upset and then immediately results to trying to guilt trip somebody over a player character death in Dungeons & Dragons, yeah, it's probably best that they don't play the table. Totally understand if you don't want your character to die. Emotions can run high after that sort of event, but in the end, you need to remember that it is also a game, and getting that mad about it, well, it can really ruin it for other people. So yeah, while emotions can be high, always remember to ask yourself, how much fun is raging for you and for the other party members? So a little background first. I've been playing D&D for about 7+ years. I recently moved into a different country for graduation school and was lucky enough to find a group of players to play D&D with. Everyone in this group, with the exception of myself and the DM, are all new players. That's no problem for me though. I'm a pretty patient person and I like helping people learn their characters and the game. Unfortunately, some new players don't exactly grasp the concept of D&D. This story involves one of these new players. This player opted to play an evil Yuan-Ti trickster cleric. This character is not the type of Yuan-Ti that looks human. No, she's the type that is literally half snake. Her backstory is basically that she is part of a cult who worships an evil demigod hell-bent on overthrowing all the other gods. She was disguised as a nun for the goddess of love while secretly recruiting people to her cult. The party starts in a big city during one of its festivals. This is the type of city that values peace and cooperation over all else. They have guards, but not a jail, so they kick people out and ban them from the city if they're causing problems. Yuan-Ti Cleric is in the city secretly recruiting people by handing out flyers for the quote-unquote goddess of love. During her time in the city, the player was required to make several rolls to hide the fact that she was a Yuan-Ti snake person and recruiting people for a cult. the party all meet up through various means and decide to work together to complete a tournament the city is hosting to earn some gold. We win the tournament, and the party decide to party together afterwards with our new riches. My character, a rogue, and another character, druid, noticed guards secretly following our party. We found it strange, but decided to just keep quiet to see what was happening. Eventually, the guards approach us and take us in for questioning. The commander of the guards accuses her of being a Yanti and gives her a clear warning not to cause any more trouble in the city. She agrees, and they let everyone go. Right afterwards, she goes back to recruiting people. A few days pass where we do side quests and various other things in the city, none of which is important for the story. It is important to note, however, that Yanti Cleric is being highly suspicious and generally untrustworthy. She doesn't interact much with the party except to make a joke or two, or just act more suspicious. On one of the days in the city, my character, Rogue, who is secretly part of Assassin's Guild, gets a message that a hit has been put out on the Yanti Cleric. I realize out of character that it's probably the commander of the guard who placed the hit, so my rogue sneaks to Yanti Cleric's room in the middle of the night and kills her. The next day, the party finds her dead body and alerts the commander. The commander explains that the Yanti Cleric was part of an evil cult and was recruiting people for it in the city. Despite knowing all of this, the party decided to revive her using a high-level spell. The session ends with the reviving spell working. The DM advises the player to make a backup character, just in case. Next session starts with the Yanti Cleric alive. The party interrogates her about her relation to the cult and her intentions. She shows no sign of wanting to leave the cult and tries to lie her way out of trouble, but the party has, well, high enough insight to see past it. After some debate, we decide to kick her out of the city because no one can trust her to be part of a party anymore. My character secretly follows her while the commander leads her out of the city. Our characters get into a small fight when she's alone, and my character ends up killing her again. My character drags her body into a river, so no one else finds it. The player is obviously pissed that his character is dead. I feel super guilty about it, so I have to talk with the DM about the situation. The DM agrees that he messed up by having my character target another, that he should have thought more about it. The player is still pissed. It's then that I learn he's not pissed because another party member killed his character. He's pissed because he had plans to become the BBEG at level 20 and kill the party. The DM specifically told the player during character creation that his Yanti was probably not going to last long considering her alignment and her evil goals. The DM even admitted that if my character didn't kill Yanti Cleric, he would probably have the commander kill her once they were out of the gates of the city. So the player starts messaging me after the session asking me why I killed his character. He says all these things about how he didn't get to enact any of his plans. He complains that his evil cult character couldn't even get a cool death or take any of the other characters with her. Then he threatens to make a new character and not tell the DM anything about her so that no one can mess up his plans to kill everybody. I tell him that this will get him kicked from the table. I also do apologize for killing his character, but also point out that it's hard to play an evil character in a not evil party, and D&D isn't about player characters competing with each other. It's supposed to be a cooperative game. I am sure to point out that the DM admitted he made a mistake by putting player characters against each other like that. He ignores everything I say and still seems determined to screw over the party for one reason or another. I tell the DM about this, and he agrees to never let new players make evil characters again. The player has yet to get back to the DM about what he wants to do, so I guess we'll see if he comes back to the table or not. Neither of us have ever encountered this problem before. Personally, I think we all made mistakes in the situation, but I don't feel bad anymore knowing the player was planning to kill everyone from the start anyway. Oh, by the way, it's a little late to add, but I realize I worded this strange. The hit was put out on the cleric. It was delivered to my character, so she didn't suddenly have a pop-up on a billboard and take it. She was personally given the target. Alright, not gonna lie, early on in the story, I thought that everyone was messing up, but yeah, I'm with the OP on this one. I feel a lot less bad for the cleric after realizing that the player wanted to kill everybody. Yes, putting players against each other like that, probably a bad idea. You need a little bit of finesse in order to make it work in a roleplay sense. Having character v character conflict is definitely something that happens in D&D games. Recently, in my own game, we had a ranger who was opening up a bunch of chests that possibly were mimics to find loot. He was loot obsessed because he's a pirate, and the paladin in the group, well, she tackled him to the ground and stopped him from opening any more chests. It was PvP. It was hilarious PvP, but PvP nonetheless. It worked because we were friends who had an understanding of each other's playstyles, and we've been playing together for a while now. This guy clearly did not have the maturity to handle some sort of conflict in the party. This cleric wanted to be some kind of mega ultra bad guy and kill everybody, which, let me tell you from my own experience, is just really, really bad. And clearly, it was probably best that this character was stifled before the cleric got any fun ideas about trying to kill all the other players. Can a plot like that work? Evil character in a good party? Yeah, I talked to Whistle while you work about that, and we had a good conversation about it. However, it does require, like I said, some finesse and maturity. Two things that this cleric clearly did not have, thus resulting in a premature end. Hey y'all, so this is a story that happened recently after I brought myself and a friend of mine into my brother's campaign. I'll be using character names to have actual names, hope you enjoy. So I had made a new friend who was into D&D, so naturally we were looking for a group to play in together. My brother had been trying to get me to join his campaign as he needed more players. I had been in and out of his campaign due to real life stuff getting in the way, so when I entered with my friend Talon, I knew the other players pretty well. The party consisted of a human Echo Knight fighter named Liana, who was a former player of mine, a Warforged rogue named Finn, and the half-elf bard / paladin of Thor named Marlin. Now Marlin was the only player of the group I didn't know as well, but I had been part of my brother's campaign long enough to see him multi-class to paladin due to story reasons instead of power gaming reasons, while the rest of the party had been chased by an enormous swarm of raptors in the Valley of the Unnamed Warrior, a valley named after a paladin of Thor who had died holding off an invading forest. Similarly, Marlin tricked the raptors into chasing him to ensure the rest of the party could escape, intending to sacrifice himself to save the rest of the party. This impressed Thor enough to intervene by sending him a storm dragon to rescue him, and also offered Marlin the chance to become a paladin. So my image of this character coming into the session was a heroic bard paladin who would willingly die to ensure the party was safe. Unfortunately, that wasn't the kind of character I saw in the ensuing 2 sessions. So Talon and I made our characters for the session with the DM. I was a changeling artificer alchemist / homebrew poison using rogue archetype named Flutie, who used his shapeshifting and alchemist powers to supply buffs to his allies and use poison and sneak attack to our enemies. Talon made a Batman-esque fighter artificer dex build using the sharpshooter feat, darts, and plenty of other gadgets. We were both parts of an underground group that opposed the BBEG group of the campaign, a triumvirate of mages who were using Gaius? Magic on a massive scale to enslave the population. I was trying to save my changeling family from enslavement, and Talon was trying to be a superhero by protecting the innocents of the city. So the day of the session comes, and we reveal ourselves and our motivations to the party as they were trying to sneak into a triumvirate compound. This triumvirate compound held about 10 NPCs and allies that the players had met and grew to love playing with, and they were all likely due to be executed that very same day. Paladin is a little wary of letting us come, but I let off an impassioned speech about how I have already lost family, and if possible, I want to ensure that they don't lose theirs as well. I was very proud of the speech, as I hadn't prepared it, and had done it in my character voice, and received major kudos from the other players and inspiration from the DM. Everyone agrees to let us join for our sneaking capabilities and our role-playing. As an alchemist, I suggest everyone take an alter self potion from me so that we can shapeshift into the guards and avoid detection. The paladin tells me, "Yeah, no, I'm not taking anything from you. We'll just use my proficiency in the disguise kit to hide ourselves." That was the first red flag that something was up, but I just shrugged and agreed. Skip to us entering the compound. Thankfully, the paladin rolled high on his disguise check, so no one notices us as we enter. As I move first, I see a locked treasure room, and I make the stupid decision to try to open it with my thieves' tools. While I do successfully open it, there was a triggered alarm spell set, alerting all the guards to our presence. This was the height of stupidity for me, so I fully accept that the following events were partially my fault. However, I am not responsible for the following BS the paladin began to pull. The paladin turned to the party out of character and suggests we run. We discuss it. Talon and I tell him out of character that we don't want to leave when innocent lives are on the line. If we leave, there's a likely chance that we'll come back and everyone's going to be dead. The fighter and rogue both agree with us and say that they want to stay and try to free the prisoners before escaping. We resume the encounter. On the paladin's turn, he turns to the fighter and asks if the fighter trusts him. The fighter says yes, so the paladin touches his shoulder, and dimension doors, both him and the fighter, 400 feet away, We were all shocked and confused, but thankfully Fighter had left his echo behind in the compound, so he was able to teleport back into the dungeon on his turn. The Paladin is mad, tells us that he doesn't trust my character or Talon, that we set off the alarm on purpose. The rest of the group tells him that my mistake was understandable and that it didn't matter since both Talon and myself were still trying to help. Combat begins as this stealth mission goes straight dungeon crawl, and it is tough. Waves upon waves of magic casters, guards with 120 hit points each, all in a compound that is only skinny long corridors. All of this makes for a very slow extended combat as we gradually search the compound for our missing friend. Meanwhile, the DM asks if the Paladin wants to return to help his friends. Paladin refuses and instead uses a long-range magic item to communicate telepathically with the fighter. He uses the actor feat to mimic the fighter's voice in order to convince the fighter he wants to abandon the group. Bear in mind that if the fighter leaves, we're dead. None of us, not Talon nor I, or even the Paladin's rogue friend will be able to get out of the compound if the fighter teleports. Thankfully, the fighter resists the attempt and continues fighting. The Paladin continues to sulk on the chat, refusing to do anything and just says nasty comments. We have to stop the session midway through the dungeon, and we resume the encounter next session. The second section rolls around. The DM has convinced the Paladin to return. The Paladin has also created an enormous fog cloud while outside the complex to prevent reinforcements from entering. That was nice. We find the prisoners are being hauled off to feed some sort of giant ooze the Triumvirate wants to unleash on the city. Half of the NPCs we came to save are dead, and the ooze only needs to kill one more prisoner to be unleashed. Talon goes down, taking out one of the spellcasters, and I get knocked unconscious trying to save him. Paladin takes care of the remaining enemies, but the last prisoner is killed, and the pipe to the city's sewer opens. He is able to close the valves, but half of the ooze gets out. By the time he's done with that, Talon's character has already bled out and died. Paladin wakes me up with 1 hit point using Lay on Hands. I ask if Talon made it, and his response, in character, is seriously, who's Talon? In character, I go off on this Paladin. I tell him that both Talon and I risked our lives to save people he should have cared about but chose to abandon, and he doesn't even care enough to know our names. When Talon is revealed in character to be dead, I tell the Paladin this whole mess is his fault. If he had been there, perhaps more characters would have been saved, and Talon wouldn't be dead. I also call out his behavior as very unfitting of a Paladin. Then I apologize and offer the Paladin my last spell slot to make a potion of Alter Self so that he can disguise himself, as he was the only one who didn't have an escape route. I meant it as an olive branch, as our emotions had been a little high from this whole debacle. Paladin takes the potion and proceeds to smash it. I am furious, as that was my last spell slot, and get more furious when the Paladin tells me that he still doesn't trust me. I point out that all I have done since I met the party is put my life on the line for the party, and that I lost my only friend in the city to help him. Meanwhile, all he has done is abandon his friends he claims he wants to save. He turns to the DM and says, I know he's at 1 hit point since I healed him. I cast Thunder Wave on him. Pass or fail, I get knocked out. At this point, the Paladin intends to leave me here to die, but the fighter intervenes and says that we have to take him with us. The DM, who is trying desperately to salvage this situation, has a magical item we picked up earlier, teleport us out of the dungeon. Now, I understand that I am half to blame for this situation. I did accidentally set off the alarm, and at the end, role-played with a bit of resentment towards Paladin's character. I think that this event is the byproduct of 2 players who had 2 clashing ideas role-playing, and hopefully we can patch up this conflict by next session. The DM has talked with both of us, and we have agreed to apologize to each other in character next game. Hopefully this will be a funny story we will laugh about later. Well, that was definitely interesting. I do think the OP is kind of right here. I think I certainly hold the OP to less accountability than the Paladin. The Paladin's player just teleported 1 person out of the party. He left the rest to die in the dungeon knowingly. He made that decision. So yeah, that is really, really crappy. Whereas the OP, the person writing this, they just set a trap off on accident and had an in-character argument, which made sense because their character's best friend had just died. So yeah, I definitely hold the OP to less accountability, though I do understand where he's coming from, and it's good to be self-reflective. Hopefully this can all get wrapped up. Them agreeing to apologize in character is a mature way to end this scenario, though I do think they need to talk out of character as well. This wasn't just character conflict, it was also kind of player conflict, and you need to resolve both problems in order to fully heal the rift. That is what is most important. The characters are great, whatever, but look, the players, the relationship that you as players, as people have, that is far more important. Well, that was certainly something. If you guys enjoyed this episode of RPG Horror Stories, you want to let me know, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of my content, then please do subscribe to Crispy's Tavern. We have plenty more content just like this, as well as a campaign diary series and even more. So please do check out our channel, subscribe too. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go down to the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment worst critic to let me know you made it to the end of the video. In essence, like, comment, subscribe. I will see you all next time. Farewell.